Hello, everyone, and welcome to our HIV and Hep C testing training, known as Outreach Testing and Linkage, or OTL. This training is designed for individuals who will be providing testing services to clients, patients, and other individuals wanting to know their status. So let's just jump right in. OTL, Outreach Testing and Linkage, is a three-piece activity, we like to say, right? Step 1, introduction and informed consent. Step 2, gather and provide information. And step 3, results, refer, and close. Really quickly, it's letting people know what's going to happen during that time you're with them, gathering information so that we can best provide support or referrals, harm reduction. And then once the test is complete, where do we send them? What do we provide to them? What could be useful to them, right? Results, refer, and close. We're going to close the session, but not the door. Okay, so we're going to jump right in. Step 1, introduction and informed consent. So activities during this session, and this piece of the session shouldn't take more than 5 minutes max, right? We want to build rapport, let them know everything that we talk about is confidential. We want people to be comfortable with who we are and having this conversation, right? The skills needed, or the skills that will be happening, is that we're establishing connections with our person that's sitting in front of us and developing trust. People are going to share some of their most intimate secrets of what they enjoy, what they do, what they've been up to when it comes to HIV or hepatitis risk. So we need to have that trust, right? And informed consent is really, these pieces are key and actually required before you start the test. Every person who's going to be tested for HIV or Hep C needs to understand that everything discussed and talked about is confidential. We want to tell them about the type of test we're using, because there's different tests, right? So what type of HIV test is you're using? What does the Hep C test look like? The possible results, right? Negative, invalid, reactive, and we'll talk to you a little more about that later in the video. And then next steps based on each of the results. And then the window period. What window period, what time period does this test cover? And we talk more about window period in a little while, but just so you know, depending on the testing technology, the window period will be different. So here we go, informed consent, the components. We're going to break this down just a little more for you. Building rapport, the confidentiality. So within your testing facility or where you're working, what does confidentiality look like? Who's going to know what was discussed and what the results are? The type of test, HIV or Hep C. And I know primarily you folks are going to be testing for Hep C, so it's an OraQuick rapid Hep C test. It's testing for antibodies. The possible results are negative, reactive, or invalid. The window period is 6 months. So this test will cover anything that may have put someone at risk or exposure since the time of birth to 6 months from the day they are doing the test. Any risk or possible exposure within the last 6 months would not show up on this test, possibly might not show up on this test, and the recommendation would be to get tested again. Right? It's going to take 20 minutes for the test to process, and then you have 20 minutes when that is done to actually interpret the result. Once you provide all this information, then we ask the question, do I have your consent today to provide this test? They may be signing a form within your facility, and if they do, that's consent also. Okay, so we'd like you all to take a moment to practice the spiel. We have one written up. in your spiel, right, when I say 5 minutes, it doesn't matter who's sitting in front of you, it would be the same information, right? Our introduction, the confidentiality piece, the type of test, possible results, next steps, how long the test will take, and the window period. Here is an example of a spiel, what we call the spiel for doing testing. So if you folks would take a moment after you hear an example to read through this yourself and practice. Once you get comfortable with your spiel, I promise you, it'll just be a few minutes. Thank you.
Aloha, my name is Phil. What may I call you?
You can call me Teddy.
Mahalo for coming in, Teddy. Today we will do a rapid HIV and HCV test for you. Before we get started, I want you to know that everything we talk about is confidential and will stay between you and I unless a referral or linkage services are needed. I ask everyone all the same questions. Today we will be using the Alere Determine Rapid HIV test. The results will be ready in 20 minutes. The possible results are negative, reactive, or invalid. A negative result means no antibodies or antigens were detected. An invalid result means something went wrong with the test and we will run it again. And a reactive result means that antibodies were detected and we will do a confirmatory test. In the case of a reactive result, we will be here to support you and plan for next steps that can include linkage to medical and case management services, partner services, and ongoing support. There is a 30-day window period, so anything that you may be concerned about in the last 30 days won't show up on this test. The HCV results, for the HCV test results are the same. For your reactive test, we will link you with our hepatitis care coordinator, and the window period is 6 months. Would you like to get tested today?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. I would. Great job. Any questions, Phil, or any feedback on the spiel? I know it seems like it's very repetitive, and it was, right? Because you all were saying the same stuff. But you also might notice that sometimes saying all the words and making sure you get everything stated can be a little bit cumbersome. So hopefully this will just provide you a little bit more practice in terms of hitting all the things that are required before someone consents to the test, because we really want people to be, empowered and know what they're getting into. Kunani, can you go one slide back? So if you folks want to create your own version of the spiel, this is, again, just like a version that is useful if you want to practice, but if at least you can have these bullet points in front of you or remember them, and that way you can kind of hit all the things that you're supposed to hit so that your clients are really truly consenting to what you are offering, right? So make it your own. You could use a spiel, you could practice that, or develop your own kind of script. But like Kunani says, it'll literally take like 2 minutes, because then you can get into it. You're like, I know you're really here for the test. You said, okay, let's get you tested, and then we can talk story while it's processing. So any questions about the spiel and the consent? All right, you folks are fantastic. So I'm going to turn it over to Kunani, who's actually going to show you, I think, a few things on actually how to run the test. So someone, Majesty has said yes, she consents to the test, and now you're going to move forward with actually conducting the test. So go ahead, Kunani.
Just a couple things really quick. So there's documentation, right? If it's not documented, it didn't happen. So just know CDC requires all test data to be entered into a system called AFRIM. So you folks will get your AFRIM IDs from Alexis. But there is a form. So I just wanted to show you that every agency has this form. Now, each agency will also do things a little different when it comes to if there's an EMR and what is being collected through an EMR, or if there's a consent form, agency consent form. So please make sure that you learn or you're given all of that from your agency in order to be able to do documentation. And then if you have a rapid hepatitis C, HCV test that's reactive, Thaddeus, there's a form that we sent to Thaddeus to document and let let Thaddeus be aware that there was a reactive using the rapid test. And the main things here is really to, Thaddeus is looking at, did we get the person referred to medical care and maybe linkage and to care coordination? And did they have a confirmatory? So that's the purpose of this form. So Thaddeus will be aware of what's happening. It is required. So when you have your first reactive Hep C test, please make sure at your agency, whoever that point of contact would be, will walk you through completing this form and sending it to Thaddeus. Okay. And that is, if I'm not mistaken, AFRM, the new system, right? The update, the system that we moved to within AFRM, you're able to see if a Hep C test was offered, or because it doesn't collect anymore, correct? So
correct. So each of your agencies will be sending me reports that are separate from the evaluation web of Affirm. But I don't know if you folks will have to worry about that as much. It's someone else collecting it and sending it to me monthly. But if there's ever any questions, always feel free to reach out to me. And I'll email you all afterwards, but I'll just put my email in the chat right now too, so you'll have it.
Okay, so there is documentation. So here's just some basics that we need to know about all our test kits, depending on what you're using within your agency. Now, the reason we say do the spiel and start the test is because a lot of the tests will take 20 minutes, could take up to 20 minutes. So if you have a conversation with somebody for 30 minutes and then start the test, that's another 20 minutes the person is going to be waiting. So that's why we say don't forget, start the test right away, and then you can have all the conversation you want. But in your agency, which they'll walk you through this, but the test kits need to be stored at a certain temperature, so they'll probably be kept in a certain area, and that needs to be monitored. When you're utilizing the test, you're supposed to be in a certain temperature range. For all of our agencies and programs, even in outreach, we usually are within this temperature range, right? All our test kits now, all our testing technology, it's all a finger stick. Depending on the test, again, the device, the technology, time, 20 minutes, 1 minute for INSTI, it's 15 minutes for ChemBio, the rapid Hep C is 20 minutes. So they're all different. They all have different window periods, so that's really important to know. The read time, like when the timer goes off, after it's processed, there's a window that you have to be able to read the test, right? So 20 minutes for the Alere determined to process. Once that 20 minutes is up, you have 10 minutes to interpret the test. It's usually not a problem because it goes off right in the same room where we're sitting with our client. But there's, we need to make sure the read time is adhered to. And then what happens if you have a confirmatory? That's really important. Within every agency, it's going to look a little different. Are you doing the blood draw for the confirmatory test? Are you calling in a nurse or somebody from the clinic to do the confirmatory test, or perhaps another staff person? And then what does the linkage look like? Are you calling in a case manager, or are you the person you're going to work with this individual until they actually get the confirmed HIV test result? So all of that is within your agency. So it's really important to know that, or I would make sure. So Kiva, I'm guessing Kiva over at HiHaf or Kumukahi would be walking you folks through this. She is a trained, she used to do OTL with us. So she's a good person to have on your team. Maui AIDS Foundation, Brian, I'm guessing will be doing a lot of this with you. And people on the 7th floor, it's going to be myself. And we're going to have a hands-on training in 2 weeks. Okay, so here you go. Safety. Make sure you know your agency's protocols, universal precautions, right? Always wear gloves, making sure any sharps and everything what's needed is going into biohazard. Bloodborne pathogen, your agency should have an exposure control plan. Always implement universal precautions, things like that, PPE, right? What do you need? Gloves? Do you want the goggles? Do you want the coat? None of that. Gloves are required. The coat and the goggles aren't, but if you're more comfortable, you go ahead and use them, right? And I think when we present ourselves, I like to tell everybody, when you walk into your doctor's office, do you want to see somebody in shorts and a tank top? Do you feel comfortable with getting medical diagnosis and medical consult from someone who would be dressed that way, or do you look professional? Just some words of experience. Okay, so here we go. Rapid test technology, right? So there's the Alere Determine is the one all the way on your left. I'm thinking I'm mirroring. Biolytical is in the middle. That's the 1 minute test, and some agencies do have that. The OraQuick is here. If your agency is using ChemBio, that's a 15-minute test. I really like that one for outreach. So it all depends what your agency has available for you folks. But I am going to walk you through the little video of Alere Determine. If ChemBio and Biolytical, the 1 minute test, you can do that in-house. So I'm going to show you this video now. It's going to be a few minutes, but it's going to give you all the ins and outs of the Alere Determine HIV antigen antibody combo. Okay, so that is your welcome to the world of rapid HIV testing, Alere Determine. At your agency, you will need to do hands-on training before you can actually do testing with someone. I strongly suggest you folks practice getting a sample on a live person. You don't need to run the test, but the collection of that sample, right, to fill that tube looked really cute and easy on the film. It's a pretty big sample that you have to get. And so getting comfortable on what that would look like for you, like do you want your person standing, sitting, the feel of it. So that's something I would suggest practicing a couple times before you actually have your first person. But yeah, any questions on Alere Determine?
Did it say how many drops of the solution, the buffer that you use?
I think it's just a drop, but you could use a couple if needed, right? For me, what I noticed with the solution, the solution is to help the sample flow up through the test device, the technology, right? So some people, depending on the person who you're testing, their blood could be thicker, or so sometimes you might need to add a second drop so that it'll flow, the lateral flow. Yeah. Okay. That's a great question, Phil. Thank you. Okay.
And Kunane, can I add something real quick?
Yes.
So Kunane was just giving a very good idea, which is to practice on other people in terms of collecting the specimen. But we just want to really remind you not to run that test on your coworker, because you never know, right? It wouldn't be the best if they were to find out their HIV or Hep C status from you when you're doing a practice test. So you can practice getting the sample, but do not run the test on your coworker. That's come up before, so I just wanted to clarify.
Yes, thank you for that. Exactly. Okay. All righty. So again, you folks will have to run controls prior to actually doing the test, and I would have a few little practice sessions on actually collecting the sample.
Can I ask another question?
Yes, of course.
How do you manage people who are like really, really afraid of blood, or like really, really afraid of that little prick? Like, do you have any tips or tricks on that?
I haven't really come across that situation, but what I'll do is I'll throw it out to, does anybody have any experience with someone who may be afraid of needles, afraid of, just that the sight of the blood, or, that kind of collection happening, that's in the group?
Hi, Kunane.
Yes, hi, Pono.
I had someone who was very, very nervous. Like, he had his mother in the test, or they had their mother in the room with them. That's how nervous they were for this needle stick. And they'd gotten tested before, but he's just a very nervous person. And so it was really just about, waiting until he was ready. Whatever he needed to do, like just encourage him. And one of the things that he was really worried about was wasting my time. And it's not about my time, right? It's about making him comfortable or making your clients comfortable. So it was just waiting until he was ready. I also had people just close their eyes, they don't want to look at it. And so they just turn away and close their eyes. And a lot of the time, while I'm preparing their finger, preparing all that stuff, I'm talking to them, I'm asking about their day. And that's to take their mind away. If I know that they're nervous about getting, just this little finger prick, which some people are very nervous about. But as long as you're talking and distracting them away from, what's going to happen or what's eventually going to happen, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, they've been like, oh, I didn't even feel it. I didn't even notice that you were, it's a lot worse or less than I was expecting. So I think that's, part of building rapport and having that relationship with them of trust. As long as you can put them at ease, they're not going to be as nervous.
Thank you, Pono. Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay. I think what we want to do now is I'm going to have Darius is going to give us an overview of the Aura Quick Rapid Hep C test.
Yeah, thanks, Hunane. So I don't have a video for you, so you folks will just have to watch me a little bit, but it's fairly easy. You could see here, this is what the package looks like. Many of you already have, well, all of you have these in your sites, so you will learn to use this. There's 2 pouches, if you can tell in that picture. One pouch holds the little vial of fluid, the solution, and the other pouch holds the test paddle, which you can see on this kind of quick reference guide. The main thing to remember is after you do the HIV test, you have their finger pricked, you can get you can wipe it off with a gauze and just get the second drop of blood. The nice thing with this test is it doesn't require as much blood. So you're literally going to take something that comes with this, which looks like a little bubble wand. I don't know if you folks can see that where it says step 2 or even step 1. It's a little hard to see, but you're going to hold this little bubble wand with a little hole just to the drop of blood. It'll fill it completely very quickly. It doesn't need that much. You're going to take it in, put it in that solution that's in the holder and stir it, and then put the test paddle in. And then that's all you do. And then what you'll do after you read the test is just discard everything except that blue holder, which you can reuse again. So, yep, this is a little bit of a clearer view. So you can see here, there's the test device with the flat pad. There's a result window. That's so that's in one pouch. In the second pouch is the test developer and solution and the vial. There's a reusable test stand, and then the collection loop is provided separately from that little package, but you folks will all have it already. Next slide, please. So you're going to read it in the very much the same way. All you're looking for this test is just antibody, and there's no antigen test for this, just so you folks know, right? So there'll be 2 lines that can appear. The C line, you can see there, the control line appears if the test is working, so that always has to be there. It has to go all the way across, but the background could be any color. As long as you can see a line crossing at the C, that means that it's working. The T line will appear, and again, a full line all the way across, regardless of what colors are appearing, if antibody is detected for Hep C. On the back, you could see vent holes, so just don't block that. You probably won't, but sometimes people used to put stickers on the back, so just be very aware that not to cover that. And you're going to read this within 20 to 40 minutes, right? So you have some time after the timer goes off to read it. You have 20 additional minutes to actually physically read it. It doesn't mean you have to tell the person right away if you're talking or they're concerned or something, but you just have to read it within that time period. Next slide, please. All right, and these are just some examples for you folks to see. So again, on the left is a negative result, right? The control line appears, so it means that it's working. The T line is not there, so there is no detected antibody. The middle one is reactive, right? The control line appears, and now you have a T line that shows that there is some antibody present. And an invalid result shows no C line, right? So next slide, please. Perfect. What causes invalid? So there's many things that can cause it. I think, Kunal, if you could click a couple more times. These are all reasons, but you're not going to go into it with a client. You're not going to be like, oh, maybe it was this, or maybe it was that. All you need to know is if it's invalid, you don't deliver, or you said there's, it's invalid, it's not working for some reason, we can run your test again if you choose to, right? It's all, the client gets that choice. They might have to go or something. But don't go into why it's not working with the client, because that won't really help, right? But you will want to kind of make sure your supervisor knows about it. So next slide. And now we're going to practice reading results. So I'll turn it to Kunane for you folks now to read HIV results.
Okay, who wants to take a jab at number 5? What is the result? We need a better picture.
I think it's reactive.
Yeah, reactive, right? Because there is a control line and there is a line at the bottom, right? The antigen line. Okay. How about number 6 or 8A?
Reactive.
Non-reactive.
Non-reactive, right? So negative or non-reactive, you're going to use whatever terminology your agency tells you to use. But right, it worked because we have a control line. No antibodies or antigens were detected. How about number 7 or 10A?
Invalid.
Invalid, correct, right? No control line. Why is it invalid?
No control line.
Okay, well, okay, yeah. I was trying to figure out, I was waiting for somebody to say, oh, tester or the blood, whatever, right? We just don't know. Okay, trick question. And then number 8.
Reactive.
Very good, reactive, right? So there's a line in the antigen box and there is a line in the control box. So the result is reactive. And yes, perfect.
All right, Hep C time. So, and you feel free to put your guesses in the chat as well. So what is A? What result is that? Non-reactive, reactive, or invalid? You can feel free to shout out too.
Non-reactive.
Non-reactive.
Right, very good. There's control line and no T line. What about B?
Reactive.
Yep, reactive, very good. And you folks will see too, like when you run controls for Hep C, they'll be really, really faint. And after this training, I'll actually have to go through with each of you, or Kunane will, to look at the visual reference panel, and it'll be purposely faint to prove that you can read the results. So very good. C, what is C?
Reactive.
Nice, reactive, very good. And if anyone has any questions about why they are reactive or non-reactive, please let me know. Okay, D, what is that?
Invalid.
Invalid, very good. And E?
Invalid.
Invalid. F? Invalid, right? So yeah, no, she forgot to turn it on, right? So all of them are invalid if you were running a specimen. G?
Non-reactive.
Correct, yep, non-reactive. So remember, the background doesn't matter as long as you can see the line all the way across. Very good. And then H?
Reactive.
Reactive.
Nice, very good. Good job, everyone. So next slide, please. Okay, so I think we talked about this already. We talked about the T line, the test line. Next slide, please. And the controls work together. So basically, this is just reiterating a lot of what you folks, we already told you about the control lines and why we have the T line as well. Next slide. All right, I'll turn it back to Kunane and then we'll take a break after this.
So just so that everybody knows, before you actually can implement or start testing on a person, you folks would need to run controls in your office with whoever is going to be there walking you through that process. But again, it's as if you're going to be running an actual test on somebody. The controls are designed to give you a specific result, whether it is reactive or negative. So please make sure that you do this. If we were in person, we would all be doing it together. We would have our lab set up. But these are the steps to make that happen. So again, please check in with whoever's in charge or coordinating testers at your agency to make sure you run controls. And when you run controls, you need to document that you actually did it, right? So controls are run, new tester. If there's an issue, right, if you have 2 invalids in a row, then you want to run controls to determine, is it the test kit that's not working? Is it a tester error or something like that, right? So that's what, and then frequency. So like here we run controls every month, the beginning of the month. And then we run controls when you get a new shipment. So you would need to check with your agency on what are your policy, what is your policy around when controls get run. But anytime you run controls, there will be documentation. A log that looks similar to this. Okay, so with that, we're at a break.
All right, well, welcome back, everyone. We're more than halfway there, and you're already in step 2. So you remember step 1 was just basically the spiel. You learned how to run and read the test. So Majesty gave consent, you pricked their finger, and now you're going to step 2. And so step 2 is going to be about talking story. What you're basically going to do is really just focusing on learning more about the context and why they're here, right? Because maybe we're really concerned about getting them tested for HIV or hepatitis C, but they might have other needs that are more important. And maybe if we can address that, it will kind of build relationships that they'll come back and get tested more often. So things that for you to remember during step 2 are to ask open-ended questions. And we'll explore a little bit more about that, but can someone ask me an open-ended question right now?
What's going on with you today?
Nice, thank you. Not much, but thanks so much. Great, so open-ended question allows for a little bit more of thought and a little bit more of explanation rather than, did you have sex with someone, right? Yes or no. So closed-ended questions are just yes or no, or very like short answer questions. And then we want to explore the world of openness, right? So open-ended questions. We're going to highlight people's previous successes. So that's, for example, when someone's like, I'm really worried, I only use condoms half the time or something. You can say, well, it's really good that you use condoms half the time. That's great, 50%. I'm so proud of you. And just really highlight and show the strengths that they're already kind of displaying. So really kind of acknowledge that. Explore the barriers. So now, I know that you have trouble using condoms. What are some of the challenges? Like, oh, it costs money, or I'm embarrassed to carry them, or whatever. So it's kind of lean into that moment and just see a little bit more of what's happening in their lives that make things challenging, right? The affirm form, or the affirm form, is the form that Kunani already showed you. That's the data collection form that you folks will have to use for any HIV test. So you can use that as a guide if you want to show people like, oh, I use this form for everyone, so I'm just going to ask you some basic risk questions. If you feel uncomfortable, or if they seem to feel uncomfortable, you can just reiterate that these questions are just something that we have to collect and it is confidential. So you can use the form as a way of engaging as well. And then, of course, any other documentation that your agencies require, right? So you're going to just make sure to kind of touch all these things during step 2. What you're going to really practice, though, is actively listening, right? So just really try to hear what people are saying, really just kind of, again, like make it conversational if you are comfortable with that. You can use a form, but really just making it so that people feel heard and that you're listening to what they're saying, and that way you can respond with the best way to meet their needs. Exploring context with questions. So a great one for you folks is just tell me more about that. So if you can't think of anything to say, or you're feeling a little bit stuck, or you don't know what to follow up with something, just be like, tell me more about that. And then silence is always a great way of just allowing people space to kind of speak up, right? So you're going to try to match the risks to referrals. So depending on what their needs are, depending what the risk is, you're going to try to make an appropriate referral later on, right? So you can just start to think about it. So if they're like, I don't have clean needles or clean works, you're like, okay. And you can think about the syringe exchange program and the opportunities that might come out of that later, right? The last one is a tricky one, but we put it here because I think, especially in Hawaii, because it is more talk story and conversational, sometimes humor can be appropriate if you are if you read it correctly. So I wouldn't say just use humor all the time, but if you're talking story with someone and you have that vibe and you're part of the community, or you know how to you have lived experience and humor does come up as appropriate, it is something that you can do to kind of ease the tension. And always, it's not on here, but of course be genuine too. So try to pretend that you're part of a community that you're not part of, because of course people can see through that immediately. So try not to use lingo or slang or anything that you wouldn't normally use, because then it can come off very false, right? So that's step 2. I think all of you are probably very good at this. You know how to talk to people. You're already working in your communities. You are, very, you're in organizations that really value people. So I think you are already kind of well set in this, but we're going to give you a chance to practice some of the skills that come with this. Any questions for step 2? All right. So we're going to go on to some skill stuff. So these are just some possible open-ended questions. So we'll just, I'll just go around and you can read the question and then tell me if it's an open-ended question or not. So 7th floor conference room, what's up? How about a volunteer from the 7th floor? Only one person from the 7th floor has to do it. Maybe someone who hasn't done it already. All right, so
I think so. Can you repeat the request?
Yeah, sure. So read any one of these questions and then tell me if it's open-ended or closed-ended.
Oh, okay. I can do it.
Okay.
What brought you into the clinic today? That's open-ended, right?
Yep, perfect. And a great opener right after you complete doing the test. So great, excellent. All right, let's see, Asher, pick a question.
How often do you use drugs and or alcohol? So you just want me to answer this?
You can, and then you say if it's open-ended or closed-ended.
Oh, okay. I would say this is open-ended because it makes them think about it. They've got to answer it. Very
good. Thanks, Asher. Yeah, anything that starts with the who, what, when, why, how are generally open-ended questions. Great job. Phil, pick your question. Oh, and we can't hear you, Phil. Oh, we still can't hear you, Phil. Well, while you're managing some technical difficulties, we'll move on to Willie. So Willie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so the question I picked is, what is one thing you can do to reduce your risk? That's an open-ended question.
Very good. Thanks, Willie. BJ, do you want to give it a shot?
Sure. Did you get high? That's like a close-ended because they can answer yes or no.
Exactly. And sometimes they will, and then they'll just sit there and stare at you. So very good. Thanks, BJ. Lauren, I know you had technical difficulties later, but do you want to try in the chat? So feel free if you want to put it in the chat. And then Phil, do you want to try again, or is audio?
I can go.
Oh, go
Can
ahead.
you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Do you want to stay HIV negative? Is a closed question because they can answer yes or no.
Great, perfect. Thanks, Phil. So great job. I think you folks are pretty adept at picking this. So these are just some other kind of options, and you can see here the ones that are close-ended are the ones that are highlighted in bluish teal or bold, if you can't see color. So just to kind of note, they are interspersed there. And the open-ended ones are actually really great questions that you can keep in your back pocket when you're having your talk story moments with folks. Next slide, please.
That is, I just wanted to throw in real quick that close-ended questions can be okay, and you might get some of them if you're looking at the form, but then you follow up with that open-ended question so that you can they can elaborate more about what they mean by when you say, "Do you get high?" and they say, "Oh yeah." And then you could, well, tell me more about that, right? So you can follow up with that open-ended question so that they can elaborate on what they just shared, to that response of yes or no.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you. And now you folks are going to practice it on George. Kunane is going to be your client, George, and you collectively will be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 headed counselor. We're going to count the 7th floor conference room as one person. So what you folks are going to do is George has just come in. He gave consent to take the test. He's pricked his finger. And so I'm going to call you your name, and you're going to ask George an open-ended question to learn more about his risks for HIV or hepatitis C. You're going to build on the previous questions as if you're all one person. So one mega multi-headed counselor. And if you say a close-ended question, then you should follow up with, tell me more about that, right? So this is just to gain a little bit more skills in asking the questions for a client. So George, I think he's actually George of the Jungle. So George, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, so I will call you your name, and you're just going to ask one closed-ended question to George and build off the people before you. And we'll see if we'll do possibly 2 rounds. So George just took the test. And so BJ, you're the first one that appears for me. So BJ, start it off.
Hi, George. Can you tell me something about your partners?
Well, my partners, they're all men that I meet at different places and things like that. But yeah, only men. I only sleep with men.
Okay, thank you, George.
Thanks, George. Asher?
Okay, that's awesome, George. And if you don't mind me asking, how often do you use protection?
Well, what do you mean by protection? Because, I would say maybe if I'm lucky, or maybe 30% of the time. It kind of depends where I am and who I'm with. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Asher. Phil, you're up next.
That's really great. You're using condoms 30% of the time. Where do you usually meet the people that you have sex with?
At the park, at the club, online. Sometimes it all depends. At the beach park. I'm trying to remember the name of that park in Hilo, but never mind. By the hotel, down by Bayfront Drive or whatever that is. Yeah.
Ouchie.
Thanks, Phil. And seventh floor conference room. Who wants to ask a follow-up question?
No, so you said you don't always use condoms. What what do you do when you meet up with these guys? Oh.
What do I do with them?
Yeah, what do you do?
It kind of depends where, it depends on the moment, but I enjoy everything, right? Top, bottom, swinging, everything. I enjoy it all. Oral sex, anal sex. Yeah.
All of the above.
Great.
Thanks for sharing.
Great job, seventh floor. And Willie, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Okay, George. So I see that you do it all then. So I would say, do you ask your partners, if they're HIV positive? And if you do, how do you ask it? Like, I want to know what you actually say to them.
Oh, that can be hard, right? It all depends. If they look sketchy, then I might ask that, and then I'll ask, right, when they got tested, or what, HIV, or if they're clean or whatever. But if they're hot, if Zeus is standing in front of me and it's hot and heavy, I don't ask, right? Because I don't want to spoil the mood.
Thanks, Willie, and thanks, George. So we're going to go one more round and now maybe see if you can find a little bit more about substance use for George. So Asher, back to you.
Well, thank you again, George, for answering these questions. Just to get a little bit more information about you, what or how often do you use drugs or consume alcohol?
It all. So usually daytime, if I'm out cruising or whatever, I might have to smoke a joint or something just to kind of mellow out. At nighttime, though, it could be, it might be more of a party where we're drinking and smoking, just kind of having a really good time. And then it also, if somebody brings something, then I don't want to turn it down. I don't want to dampen the mood. So I say yes to whatever they bring.
Thanks, Asher. And BJ, you want to go next?
Hi, George. Thank you for sharing about your party moments. I just want to elaborate more. Can you tell me more when people bring other items to the party? Are you concerned if it's a clean needle, or can you tell me more about that?
If they have whatever they have, I want it, right? I want it. So I just kind of go with it. And I haven't really thought too much about, the needle, and whatever, because I figure we're already doing what we're doing, right? So I don't need to worry about, why worry about the needle?
Great. And Phil?
Great, thanks for telling me about that and sharing. Have you thought about any options or tools that are available that could make things just a little safer if you're sharing needles or having unprotected sex?
No.
Tell me more about that.
There you go. Perfect. I haven't really thought about it. I just kind of go with what's going on. I mean, every now and then I worry about, the next day, or I worry a little bit about it, but so far so good. So I haven't thought too much about any of that, but I do get worried sometimes.
Thanks for the follow-up, Phil. And seventh floor conference room.
Did you have one?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
So I saw, so that's great that you're really concerned about your health,
sharing needles can be kind of dangerous, Would you be interested in maybe learning more about like how we could help you with like safe usage of these narcotics? Is that something that you might be interested in sitting down with us? Maybe we could set you up with one of our case managers.
Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to do it now. Whenever you're ready, and it will just help with how you want to proceed going forward.
Okay, yeah, we can talk a little more about that.
Thanks, seventh floor. And Willie?
And how often would you say you are under the influence when you're doing these hookups?
For sure, all the time when I'm at nighttime, because I'm always, where it's usually the sex will come, the hookup is coming because of the party, usually. During the day, I mean, it's kind of random, but yeah, I do it, but nighttime for sure, we like to party and play, right? Because then I can go all night.
Great. And we just have one question in the chat since Lauren can't talk. So hi, George. Do these parties offer drug testing strips like fentanyl strips?
I don't know, to tell you the truth. I haven't seen any, but I'm just figuring the people know what they have.
Well, let's give George a round of applause, everyone, for just sharing his time with us. He makes an appearance every OTL session from the jungle. Thank you, George. And thank you all for asking the questions. I know it's a little bit challenging to kind of come up with questions sometimes, but I think you all did a great job. But I want to ask George, how did you feel, George? What were some things that could have been that you really loved, and what were some things that could have been a little different?
So I like the questions that were being asked. So thank you, everybody. I was trying to throw some bones, and I know because we're all doing it one by one, we're all focused on what's my question gonna be. But we're like, how to just kind of continue the flow of, how to continue the flow of whatever topic you're on or the question to kind of dig deeper. So that's something that you'll get used to, right? Because we kind of do it already when we have conversations, is how do we, versus hopping around. And so that went well. And then, I don't know, I think it really comes with practice, because I'm going to tell you now, 20 minutes is a long time to have a conversation with somebody. And sometimes somebody's risk might be small. Sometimes, they might not even realize they're at risk, right? Or that there is a risk in what they're doing. And so how do we generate that conversation? And even though we might have the gift of gab, it can take a little while. So it went smooth. I just would say continue, always ask questions to build upon whatever was asked first. And then go from there. Yeah.
Can I add something?
Sure.
So I haven't done testing before, but I have talked with people just about I don't know, biding time, helping folks explore or express their concerns. And I think that sometimes focusing on specific behaviors can lead us to be backed into sort of a corner as the provider who's responsible for creating a comfortable space. And one thing that I defer to is just asking people, especially when they, you mentioned, as you were George, that, you had a little bit of concern, or you were half and half doing condoms this time and half not doing condoms, and just asking can you tell me more about that little bit of concern that you have, or can you tell me more about the things that you don't have a lot of info on that you want more information. So putting it in their court, if the person's comfortable, putting it in their court to let you know what their priorities are, so you don't have to make stuff up to talk about.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, especially because when you say, somebody asked about are you having safe sex? Or there was a question around that, and it's like, well, what does that safe sex for some? It looks different for every person, right? So sometimes asking some of the questions is like that. Tell me more, to elaborate. What does that look like for you? You know, what does that mean to you? Those are great questions, so that George can tell you, you know, that I'm out every night getting plugged till 3 a.m., you know, without a condom or whatever it may be, right? That's what we're hoping to hear. So then we can talk about what can we do or offer to someone around harm reduction, right? And that's where we're hoping to go with the conversation.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. Was that Lee talking? I can't really tell who is in seventh.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Lee. That's a really excellent point. So I think that goes back to the active listening, where you're listening to hear their concerns and using that as your as where the client wants to go. We'll also acknowledge that sometimes people don't want to talk about HIV, Hep C, drugs, or sex at all, and it's completely valid that you can still provide the test. And you just might talk story about whatever else. So maybe for 20 minutes, you're just building rapport, and that's totally fine as well. Especially for those, I think there's 3 people from SEP who might do testing at the van. Sometimes it will be, you know, something completely different, and that's totally fine. Having sat in the back of the trunk and get done testing. So, yeah, and some people will feel really uncomfortable and they just don't want to talk to you, and they'll just come back when the test is ready, which is completely fine as well. So all of this is, other than the consent part, really, the rest of this is not prescriptive. So you folks know your community the best, you know your clients the best, you know how to read them and like work with them. So really just take their lead and see where the conversation goes. So all of this is just kind of skill building, but not intended to be a limitation or a requirement for you folks. Although you probably will still have to fill out that form for HIV stuff. But other than that, great point, Lee, thank you. Anyone else have any comments or questions about their interaction with George today?
You know, I just want, when you add, like, depending on who you're chatting with, just be ready, right? When we ask the question, some people are going to tell you everything. And so making sure you're comfortable hearing what's being shared. And then a little trick for me is if they're silent and they don't really want to, the person doesn't want to necessarily share their own personal information or, you know, background or answer the questions about what they're doing, then I just kind of maybe flip the conversation. Well, why don't you tell me what you know about HIV or what you know around hepatitis? Because then they just start talking about the topic without feeling like they're talking about themselves, right? Because like, I might not want to tell you my secrets just yet. And then sometimes that will lead into that more in-depth conversation where they'll feel more comfortable. Same thing with giving out condoms and lube. They don't want to take it for themselves, right? Oh, I don't need that. I don't need that. And then you say, well, why don't you take some for your friends, right? And then so they're like, oh, okay, I'll take it for my friends. And you kind of know they're really going to take it. They're taking it for themselves. But, you know, we're shame, right? We don't want to, it's like, oh, I don't want to take 100 condoms because I don't want to, you know, look like I'm the easy or whatever, right? But I'll take them for my friends because they're easy.
Yeah, or they have a lot of friends. So thanks, Kunane. Any other comments or questions for Kunane/George? All right, we'll move forward to step 3. So step 3, so you've talked story with folks. They might have shared with you, maybe they didn't, but when the results are done, the timer will go off and pretty much the conversation will likely stop because that's what they're here for, right? So once that beeping goes off, you're going to move into step 3. And step 3 is really providing the results, making any referrals based on what you've discussed already and that they're willing to accept, and then closing the session, but not the door. So just kind of keeping it open and reassuring people that they can come back later for future testing, or they'll know at least that you're around, right? So during this session, what you folks will do is disclose the test result. And you want to try to disclose it in as neutral a way as possible, because you don't know how someone's feeling about the result, even if it's negative, right? So just we always try to say, and you can see there in the skills, your results are ready. Are you ready for your results? because that's also a thing. They might not be ready to receive the results yet. And that's happened a few times. So they might be like, can you just give me 5 minutes? I just really need to get ready and just like, or like, yes, so you give them the power to say and accept their results. You provide the results in a very neutral way. So your result is non-reactive, and then you just kind of stop, right? And so that way you give them space to kind of process it and also react to it, so that you're not filling in the reaction for them. Like, oh, it's negative, hooray, right? It's like your result is non-reactive. And then if they're like, yay, hooray, then you can kind of support that, right? So you're going to explore the meaning of the result for them. So it could be yay, or it could be like confusion or whatever. Addressing that emotion and kind of validating it, that will also kind of provide opportunity for you to kind of discuss and bring it back like, oh, you're so excited about this. Let's remember kind of some of the stuff that we talked about, right? So you're going to take these condoms to your friends today, or you're going to go meet Lee at the syringe exchange or wherever. You're going to kind of remind people what we talked about in terms of next steps. And sometimes something that I heard someone say one time, which is very a great way of saying it, was like, oh, how can we keep this feeling of excitement and relief going for you in the future, right? How can we keep it going? And these are some of the prevention opportunities, right? So you're going to summarize, and then you're going to establish future meetings. So this is where, if appropriate, you can say, you can always come back. We're here open 9 to 5 or whatever. Ask for Thaddeus, and I'll be here testing or something like that, right? And only say true things, of course, right? So don't say things like, you can call me anytime, unless you literally mean call me anytime at 2 a.m., right? So set your own boundaries so that they can know what to expect as well. So we're here every Wednesday. Feel free to come by then, right? From 9 to 5 or whatever. So just be real and truthful. And the skills, I already mentioned kind of what you can say. You're going to provide emotional support. And sometimes people need emotional support with a non-reactive test. That's happened a few times because they might be expecting to be reactive, right? And so it's really, they're kind of holding it and expecting some news that was not the best news for them, right? So kind of hold in that space if you need. Ensure appropriate follow-up. I think we discussed that, right? And then also just maintain that relationship, build off that rapport. And just, again, you folks, because you're going to be probably outreaching or on the front lines a lot of the times, will be that face that people recognize as the tester. So the testers are usually the doorway to all the other services. So if you can maintain that rapport and relationship, that's a great opportunity for that person to get whatever help they need and that they want. So any questions about step 3? Okay, so next slide then. So if they're reactive, of course is going to change quite dramatically, right? So if someone's Hep C or HIV reactive, and especially if they don't know it, you're going to focus a lot more on emotional support, and also know that your session is likely going to become much longer, right? You're not going to go as deep into kind of like next steps, but you will try to make sure that they feel supported, that there's not going to be any self-harm. So usually we try to talk about, what are you going to do later tonight? Who can you talk to tonight? Just kind of make sure that they feel as supported as possible. And sometimes you might be the only support. And if so, again, just be very clear about how much support you can offer. So, you can feel free to text me until 10 p.m. tonight. I'll be available for you or something. Just be very clear so that they know when they can reach you, if that's an option for you. So you're going to provide a lot of emotional support, and you're also going to, not go deep into it, but just remind people, it's really important that we make sure that we confirm your test. So we're going to draw blood. You remember I mentioned it at the beginning, and just really make sure that you get that confirmatory test so that they can get linked to further services, right? So that's the main thing if someone comes with a reactive result, is providing that emotional support, making sure they feel safe and supported, and then also making sure they get the confirmatory test. and then establishing the next time you're going to meet with them. So that is usually in a few days. So you could say, how about we meet again on Sunday? Are you available, or are you available on Monday? And it gives something at least that you both can look forward to and know that's going to happen next, right? Kunani, I know I've given quite a few reactive tests for HIV and Hep C, and Kunani, I know you have too. Do you want to share a little bit about, how people react and any things that you learned from giving results?
Every reactive test has had a different response from the person that's sitting with me. And I had one person who was really not sure what was going to happen next. So we became that person. I became that person to talk with him and support him and check in with him, because he didn't want to share that. He didn't want to share his result with anybody just yet. And so I just checked in with him. I continued to check in with him. We got him linked. We did the confirmatory, and we had it set up to for him to see a case manager when the confirmatory result came in. So everybody's situation or process is going to look different. I've had people where they were ready and open to speak to. So we're lucky here at our agency. We have a couple people who are living with HIV that are open to come in and share their experience with someone who may be newly diagnosed, so that they have a personal perspective. I had one where we brought the person, my friend who works here, who happens to be living with HIV, came in and shared his story a little bit with them too, and then also talk about what it would look like to become a client, right? To become case managed, and the wanting to get linked to medical care. And so each one is different. We had one, and I'll tell the story that is. We had one tester who, was trained, and then her first test came in, and as the line was becoming reactive, showing up reactive, she was like, oh, it's not looking good. And, she started to break down and was, emotional herself, and the client ended up having to support her. So, that's kind of not what our role is, but we're from the community. We can't help but to feel, right? But we want to make sure that we put our focus on our client. My very first positive, when I told them they were positive, they said, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And I was looking at him going, what do you mean? And he goes, and then he told me, became truthful of all his risks and everything like that, right? That he was expecting this because of that. At first he told, I wasn't expecting it because he had shared very little risk, right? And so you just never know. And so he responded like, oh, I knew it. And I was all like, you lie. I'm thinking in my head, you lied to me or whatever, right? Because he had partnered it. So every result is going to be, every reactive will be a different situation. The good thing here and at every agency is after you give that reactive and they leave, you can process with your coworkers or your colleagues, because it can be emotional. We're giving life-changing news, right? We're giving life-changing news. Yeah.
Thanks, Kunane. And does anyone, just thinking about it, has anyone have any questions or concerns or feelings around giving a reactive result that they want to ask right now?
This is Lee from the conference room. I was wondering if either of you could share experiences giving reactive result in like a semi-public setting. So Thaddeus, you mentioned you've tested at the back of the set van before. And if you just have any experiences that, were notable around that.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. So something just in terms of confidentiality, because if you're testing in the back of the van, people, the other participants can definitely see that someone's getting tested. So what I try to do if someone's reactive, and I've only gotten Hep C reactives testing at the van. I've never had an HIV reactive at the van. Is I always when I give results, I kind of walk away a little bit under the shade and I just kind of let them know that the result is reactive or non-reactive. So it's always the same space, always the same tone of voice. But if they're reactive, I also give them the option if they want to discuss it later. So people aren't asking like, hey, why are you there for like 30 minutes talking with that guy, right? So I'm like, your test results is reactive. If you want to keep talking about it, we can, or I can follow up with you later when I, have time and I'm not testing. So I always want to give them the option so that they could walk away and not have to explain to anyone who's waiting for them. So that's kind of I kind of worked out for the semi-public part. Some participants already know, and then they tell everyone also, which is their right as well. But yeah, so we try to kind of just give them as many options to kind of like not out themselves, basically. Does that help a little bit, or does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Kunani, do you want to add to that?
Well, I wanted to say you bring up a really good point, that is when you're testing in the office, right? This is what a reactive test might look like, right? We're going to call it, we're going to offer them to speak with a case manager. We're going to be able to do the draw blood in order to do a confirmatory. There might be a linkage person. There might be someone living with it. We have all these options available right at that moment in that setting because we're in the office. In outreach, doing testing in the field, it's going to look different. So knowing though, what is it going to look like? Should there be a reactive prior to you actually getting the reactive? It's really good, right? So we know when we would go out to do testing in the evening and, where the girls were hanging out doing sex work, everybody knew if they were in the van longer than the 20 minutes, something was up. So our plan was always, anytime there was a reactive, we're going to come back the next day. We're going to make an appointment to hook up with them the next day to take care of all of those other things. So having that plan in place, what does it look like in the setting you're in if there's a reactive? So you don't break confidentiality, because we're going to figure it out, right? He was in there a long time with Thaddeus. That must mean, but we're going to draw our own conclusion. So knowing ahead of time what that is a great example. And what does it look like then the next day?
Awesome. Any other comments on that? That's a great question. Any other concerns or questions about giving a reactive result or a non-reactive result? Do folks feel ready to give a reactive result?
Hi, sorry, it's Kenny from the 7th floor.
Uh-huh.
So, Kunani, you talked about the one tester on her first test. She got the opportunity to have a positive result, and she broke down in front of a client. I guess there's no way to prepare for that, but what would, or even you, Thaddeus, you guys want to give us some kind of what you go through mentally in the event that something like this happens, or you know what I mean? Advice?
When I first started doing this work, I would always think, oh my goodness, it's going to be really scary to give a reactive test result. And then it was shared with me by someone who had more experience that we are given the opportunity to be in a place, to be the supportive role, right? Yes, we're giving this life-changing news, and for some people, it's scary news, right? That their test is HIV positive. But our role, we shouldn't be afraid of delivering that news. I like to look at it that we get to be the person to provide the support to them, to guide them to whatever is next for them, right? We are given that opportunity, right? And so if I look at it that way, right? Because we want them to know, we want everybody to know their status, because then behavior change starts based on the status. So I like to say I I don't want to say lucky, but I am blessed with the opportunity to be that person to do that. Because I sometimes I like, it's nice to know, or it's good to feel that we're able to make a difference in a way that we are being supportive to somebody who may be getting this scary news, or just news they're already aware of, but didn't want to get confirmed or something like that. And so we have the opportunity to make that difference. So don't be afraid of the scary news. Look at it in a way that you get to be the person who's going to support them through this process. But if it does, process with your coworkers if you need to after.
And then Kunani, going with that, providing support and emotional comfort, but also making sure that yourself, like the actual advances in medicine that have happened even within the past 5 years about how treatable HIV is right now. Like, it is a life-changing disease or life-changing news, but it's also not life-ending anymore, right? And so making sure you're up to date with treatments, with how livable it is, and it's not going to be the end of the world. I think that was so. I don't know if anyone cares, but I'm going to share it anyway. So my brother tested positive for HIV 3 years ago, and when I first heard, I was crushed. I was devastated because I didn't know as much as I do about it now. And again, it was that counselor, right? I broke down because I didn't know how to provide the emotional support for him. And he was the one that told me, you know what? It's okay because of this, I have all this support. And it was because of people like us that was able to be there for him with the information that he needed. And, that's kind of why we're here, right? To help these people through these life-changing things. Sorry. But yeah.
Thank you, Pono, for that.
Yeah.
No,
Thank you.
We get to be the one who supports them through the process in whatever role that they want from us. Thank you, Pono, for that.
Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for feeling that you could share, Pono. And we are all here to support you folks. So just know that you folks can always reach out to us as well, if either individually or you have a lot of people in this community that really do care and that are trying to make sure that folks feel supported. So thanks for sharing that. Any other comments or feelings that folks wanted to share before we move on? But first, we're going to talk about referrals. So results were provided, and then referrals depending on what the person really wants and what's appropriate, right? So Kunani is going to talk a little bit about next steps for some hypothetical. Actually, these are clients based on real life. So go ahead, Kunani.
Okay, so referrals, right? We talked about appropriate for referrals, right? If I talk to you about substance use and you say, do you want a condom? They don't link, right? So we wanted to add, where to next? I'm going to give you a few examples or scenarios of people we know or have come across our door. And what would be a referral that you could offer this person? An appropriate referral that you might want to offer. So who wants a client bottoms with condoms for tourists he meets on Grindr? What would be a referral or something you might want to bring up to your person?
I would refer him to our prep team. What's a prep coordinator? That is the word. Thank you. To possibly get started on PrEP so that he can continue to have these beautiful moments with the tourists to spread his own.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's a great referral, right? PrEP. And I believe every agency that's in here all has a PrEP program. So you don't even have to refer them to another building. You can refer them to somebody right in your own program. So PrEP is a great referral in this situation. Okay. Client has a burning sensation when they pee. Burning, burning, burning love. What is the referral? Where to next? What would you offer?
STI
I'd refer them. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, STI screening, that's good. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, all agencies in here offer STI screening, correct? Yeah, right? Client smokes meth and sometimes injects heroin. Who wants to take a stab? Or
Not stab, not stab.
that wasn't the appropriate word. Who wants to
Not a.
who wants to offer a referral to me?
I would refer him.
Syringe exchange program?
That.
Syringe exchange?
Syringe exchange, and I believe syringe exchange is available. Actually, I know of syringe exchange is available on every island. Do all of you know how to get in touch with the person who offers syringe exchange on your islands, in your area? Okay. Okay, so I want to ask a neighbor island this next question. Client lives on the street and is scared of homeless shelters. What would be something you referral?
Here on
Lauren?
the Big Island. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Phil.
Oh, here on the Big Island, I think we work with Catholic Charities, Care Hawaii, Gregory House, several other places.
Yeah, that's exact. So every island does have a homeless outreach program where someone there could work with an individual to get them from being unsheltered to sheltered. It doesn't necessarily mean not going to a shelter, but maybe a housing voucher or something like that. So it's good to know where you could send that person or who to link the person to. Client is on probation for drug possession, and this might need to be 7th floor. Someone up on the 7th floor talking. I see the camera moving. There you go.
Lead.
Lead, yes. So law enforcement assisted diversion. I always have to start against that. So there is a law in, I think Maui might have it also, if I'm not mistaken, but a lead program, right? So someone who might be have some legal things going on that's in a certain area can participate in a program called LEAD. Yeah. So something to really think about. Well, here's the last one. Somebody wants to gain custody of their kids. This one's a little more difficult.
I
Maybe
don't want to talk to CPS.
Yeah.
What's the other one?
maybe like legal aid or somewhere, something like that, right? So, and the reason we throw all of these scenarios in here is because even though we're doing HIV testing and Hep C testing, I come into the agency with my whole life, right? And so I might sit in front of you, and although I might be at risk for HIV, my priority might be trying to get clean and sober. My priority might be I need to get housing. I need somewhere to stay so that I don't have to sleep with whoever, to have a warm bed at night. And because of that, I'm having unprotected sex. condomless sex in order to have somewhere to sleep. And so my bigger issue is I have nowhere to sleep, right? That issue number one for me is I have nowhere to sleep. I'm engaging in these things, in these behaviors, because I'm looking for, I need housing or I need food, right? So sometimes when the person comes in to see you, there might be risk for HIV, there's risk for HIV, but their priority or their biggest issue for them, right, that they identify is housing, or it's food, or it might be legal issues or things like that, right? And all these things factor into their situation. So knowing how to be, or where to send somebody or offer support for some of the others, because I won't be able to address my condomless sex that I'm having with anonymous partners, so I have somewhere to sleep until I have somewhere to sleep, kind of thing. So sometimes we take on a whole lot more, right? And not necessarily that we're going to do all of those things or provide all those services, but we should know where to send them. Yeah. So any questions about referrals? And here's the thing with referrals that I like to tell everybody. If you're going to refer somebody somewhere for a service, make sure that wherever you're sending them, that the person they're going to see when they walk through that door is going to be just as amazing as you folks are, right? Just as understanding, just as, I guess amazing is the word, right? Because otherwise, if you send me to go see Auntie down the road at the, 3 buildings down for housing, and Auntie treats me really bad, I'm going to be mad at Auntie, but I'm going to be mad at you too. So we just want to make sure everybody that we refer people to is just as amazing and wonderful as you folks all are. Okay. I think, Thaddeus, we're pretty much at the end.
Yeah, so we're not doing role play, don't worry about it. This is just a little reminder for you folks when you're gonna just practice actually doing the test and shadowing people in your agency. So if you can go to the next slide, Kunane. All right, so you folks made it through. Again, this is just a super brief overview of OTL, but you're really getting the experience in doing it. So what's going to happen next is you folks are going to shadow at your agency, see people how they run the session, learn how to actually conduct controls, and eventually run tests. So you're going to get all of that. Once your supervisor deems that you are experienced enough, or you've gained enough experience to do it on your own, so many of you actually in the 7th floor, that will be Kunane, you will let him know, or he'll let you know actually, and then he will email me and Alexis, and then Alexis will get your kind of login information for Evaluation Web or Affirm, so to kind of certify that you folks are all ready. And one other thing that will happen before all that is that you folks will also have to look at the visual reference panel, which I think Kunane has a copy for those of you at HRC, and then Maui A's and Kumukahi, I'm gonna coordinate with you folks. I'll mail it to you, and then you just have to read the results to me. And this is just required by the FDA to ensure that you folks can read a Hep C test. It's just required for anyone who's going to use that rapid test. So we're going to coordinate with you folks on that, but fairly simple. So you folks are going to shadow, you're going to do the visual reference panel for Hep C. Once you gain enough experience, your supervisor will email Kunane, myself, and Alexis, and then we'll just get you logged on to the Evaluation Web system, which allows you to do the HIV part of it.